Hello, I'm Jim Patrick, and I'd like to thank you for joining me for this presentation. During World War II, Japanese Americans living on the west coast of the United States were forced to leave their homes for one of 10 relocation centers established by the U.S. government. 2 of these were in Arizona, and the Poston Relocation Center was at the time a part of Yuma County. This November 28th will mark the 75th anniversary of the closing of Poston, so perhaps this is a good time to reflect on some of the lessons and legacies from our nation's wartime internment of Japanese Americans. Today, Poston, Arizona is a small unincorporated community in La Paz County, Arizona. Poston is located on the Colorado River Indian Reservation, and it is roughly 15 miles south of Parker. Today's visitors can experience the Poston Memorial Monument, which is surrounded by plaques and an informational kiosk. But contemporary Poston has very few remnants of the World War II internment community that at its peak had a population of nearly 18,000 Japanese Americans. On February 19, 1942, 74 days after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, President Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066. This set in motion the forced evacuation a few weeks later of all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, 2/3 of whom were United States citizens. Roosevelt's decision was based on a widespread but groundless fear that Japanese Americans would not remain loyal to the United States. The evacuees had to leave nearly everything they owned behind. They were given less than a week to sell their property and possessions. Many Japanese Americans had been successful business owners and farmers before the war. A few of these were fortunate to find honest, non-Japanese persons to manage their property during the internment, but most lost everything. The 10 relocation centers on the map were hastily constructed in isolated areas to house the nearly 120,000 Japanese American evacuees. While the camps were being built, the individuals and families were detained in temporary assembly centers. The most notorious of these was at the Santa Anita Racetrack in Arcadia, California, where many families had to reside in horse stalls due to a shortage of barracks. The relocation order impacted Japanese Americans in southern Arizona, as well as those in California, Oregon, and Washington. Yuma had 2 families relocated to Poston, the Haradas and the Sugimotos. They were briefly taken to the Camp Mayer Assembly Center near Prescott, and then a few weeks later to Poston. Sadly, the Sugimoto family had to deal not only with the trauma of being relocated, but also with the death of the family's patriarch, who had suffered for several years with tuberculosis. The wood and tar paper barracks at the relocation centers were 20 by 100 feet in size and were each designed to accommodate 4 to 6 families. The barracks contained kerosene heat stoves and straw mattresses, but no water or toilet facilities and no stoves for cooking. Meals were served in community mess halls, and the bathroom and shower facilities offered little privacy. Poston actually consisted of 3 distinct communities, which were further broken down into blocks. A woman in the photo holds a sign representing Block 308 of Poston Camp No. 3. Due to the harsh conditions, some residents jokingly referred to Poston 1, 2, and 3 as Roaston, Toaston, and Duston. The camps were separated by a distance of 3 miles, but they were all surrounded by a single barbed wire fence. Like all of the relocation centers, Poston had armed guards on duty to prevent escape attempts. There were several schools attended by the children of Poston. For example, Poston Camps 1, 2, and 3 each contained its own accredited high school. The camp newspaper, the Poston Chronicle, was a lifeline of information for the residents. Camp libraries were also critical, but unlike the schools, there was no provision for public libraries at the relocation centers and no funding, so their success was due to volunteer efforts and private donations. Poston residents created their own much-needed sources of entertainment. Veterans of the camps later expressed particularly fond memories of the dances. The swimming pool facility in the photo was built by residents at Poston. Baseball was popular at all locations, but especially at Arizona's other camp, the Gila River Relocation Center. Actor and political activist George Takei spent 4 years of his childhood in relocation centers in Arkansas and California. He has often spoken of his experiences in the camps, and he recently published an acclaimed graphic memoir titled "They Called Us Enemy." In the following video clip, George Takei pays tribute to the interned Japanese Americans who served in the United States Armed Forces during World War II.
But the amazing thing, the astounding thing, is that thousands of young Japanese American men and women again went from behind those barbed wire fences, put on the same uniform as that of our guards, leaving their families in imprisonment to fight for this country. They said that they were going to fight not only to get their families out from behind those barbed wire fences, but because they cherished the very ideal of what our government stands for, should stand for.
Isamu, or Sam, Sugimoto was a member of one of the Yuma families sent to Poston. He was a senior at Yuma High School in the spring of 1942 and was unable to receive his diploma with his classmates. When he returned to Yuma 35 years later for a class reunion, he traveled all the way from Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is where he spent his adult life. The article states that Yuma's Isamu Sugimoto was one of the first 4 Poston residents to volunteer for U.S. Army service. He went on to serve in the highly decorated 442nd Regimental Combat Team. In the oral history clip that follows, Isamu Sugimoto, at the age of 81, explains why he chose to volunteer.
Those days, if you're a Japanese boy, you were something else, you know. It's very easy to discriminate against you mentally, you know.
So then why go fight for that?
So what else? This is your country. What else are you going to do? You either fight for them or you go back to Japan.
In 1942, when Mary Kinoshita was evacuated to Poston, she was a Bakersfield, California teenager, nearing the completion of her degree from Bakersfield Community College. In 1945, nearly 20,000 marriages took place in Yuma County, one of which was the marriage of Mary Kinoshita to Paul Higashi at the Poston Relocation Center. In the following video clip, Mary Higashi vividly recalls her unique wedding at Poston.
As I walked down the aisle with my father, the bouquet I had to be paper. I didn't have a real flower for a bridal bouquet, but that was okay. But I laughed as I walked down the aisle because I could hear the paper just rustling because I was so nervous. Then after the wedding, we had a reception in the mess hall, and the entire block was invited. For the reception, my husband bought me a gardenia corsage, which I couldn't believe, a real flower. So whenever I see a gardenia to this day, it reminds me of my wedding day.
In 2010, Mary Higashi finally received her diploma from Bakersfield Community College at the age of 87, 68 years after she was scheduled to graduate. In recent decades, the U.S. government has belatedly apologized and made reparations for its internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. In 1976, President Ford formally revoked FDR's Executive Order 9066 and declared that Japanese Americans were and are loyal Americans. The Civil Liberties Act of 1988 authorized payments of $20,000 to roughly 80,000 internment survivors. And more importantly, this legislation also directed that these survivors would receive a letter of apology from the government of the United States. The Poston Memorial Monument was dedicated in 1992. It contains this inscription: